The story begins with Bookchin, a great general, and Sian who brought stability to a tumultuous political landscape through martial prowess. Meanwhile, in the palace, Urim was enthroned as the emperor, and as a token of appreciation for their loyalty and shared struggles, he appointed 6 loyal retainers as kings to assist him in ruling the empire. Crown. This marked the beginning of a new era, with Urim at the helm and his trusted allies by his side. The appointment of the 6 kings was a strategic move aimed at consolidating power and ensuring the stability of the empire. As the story unfolds, the dynamics between Urim and his kings, as well as the challenges they face, will likely shape the fate of the empire. The scene unfolded on a ravaged battlefield, the ground littered with the remnants of war. Amidst the desolation, a lone figure lay motionless at the epicenter of the chaos. As the dust settled, the figure was revealed to be none other than great General Sian. His body was a canvas of brutal injuries, wounds covering every inch of his battered form. With a groan, General Yun leaned up, his eyes widening in shock as he beheld the 6 kings standing above him, their faces unreadable. The general's gaze burned with anger and betrayal as he locked eyes with the kings. "You bastards betrayed me," he spat, his voice laced with venom and pain. The air was heavy with tension as the 6 kings stood silent, their piercing gazes fixed intently on the fallen general. The king's impassive demeanor seemed to infuriate General Yun further. "Have you forgotten me, Sword King?" he bellowed, his voice raw with emotion. "I am Sian. The words hung in the air, a challenge and a plea all at once. The general's battered body seemed to swell with pride and defiance as he declared his identity, as if daring the king to forget the legend that was Sian. The Sword King's gaze never wavered, but his voice was laced with an unsettling calmness as he replied, "We have not forgotten, Sian, but your time has passed." As General Yun attempted to rise, his gaze fell upon his leg, and his eyes widened in horror. One of his legs was mangled beyond recognition, the damage so severe that it seemed impossible for it to still be attached to his body. He stared at the wreckage in complete disbelief, his mind struggling to comprehend the extent of the destruction. The general's face contorted in a mix of shock, pain, and despair as he whispered, No, this can't be." The reality of his situation crashed down on him like a tidal wave, and for a moment, all he could do was stare at the ruin of his leg in stunned silence. The Sword King's voice dripped with mockery as he taunted General Yun. "What can you do in that state?" he sneered, his tone laced with contempt. "This is the end, great general." A surge of energy burst forth from General Yun's battered form, radiating an aura of power that seemed almost impossible given his condition. The 6 kings took a collective step back, their eyes widening in surprise and caution. The Sword King's mocking expression faltered, replaced by a look of wariness. "Nothing will change, even if you can do this," he declared, his voice firm but laced with a hint of uncertainty. The king's retreat was a testament to the general's enduring strength, but their words were a reminder that his circumstances remained dire. General Yun's response was a fierce, defiant smile, as if he had tapped into a deep well of power that refused to be extinguished. The 6 kings exchanged skeptical glances, their whispers barely audible as they murmured to themselves, "No way! Such power with that body?" Their eyes darted to General Yun's mangled form, incredulous that he could harness such energy despite his severe injuries. The disparity between his battered physical state and the potent power emanating from him seemed almost impossible, leaving the kings questioning what they were witnessing. Their doubts hung in the air, a mixture of confusion and apprehension, as they struggled to comprehend the true extent of General Yun's abilities. With a fierce cry, General Yun declared, "I won't leave you traitors and go like this. I will face you with the determination to die together. I will show you the Avatar descent dance of Sian, the final dance of the Avatar." His voice echoed across the battlefield, a challenge and a warning to the 6 kings. As he spoke, his body began to glow with an intense, otherworldly energy, and the air around him seemed to distort and ripple. The 6 kings took a step back, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe, as they realized that General Yun was about to unleash a technique that would either destroy them or consume him entirely. The 6 kings exchanged worried glances, their thoughts unspoken but clear. "Can we really kill the great general?" The Sword King's eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing as he assessed General Yoon's battered form. "Search. A martial art from that body," he murmured, his tone laced with doubt. The king's uncertainty grew, their confidence wavering in the face of General Yoon's unyielding determination. Despite his injuries, the general's spirit remained unbroken, and his resolve to unleash the Avatar Descent Dance seemed to imbue him with an aura of invincibility. The Sword King's thoughts turned inward, his gaze piercing as he assessed General Yoon's battered form. To intimidate masters of the transcendent with that body, indeed, great general, worthy of being called a god of war, he thought to himself. A mix of emotions swirled within the Sword King, surprise, respect, and a hint of trepidation. Despite General Yoon's injuries, his aura remained imposing, and the Sword King couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for the general's unyielding spirit. General Yoon's eyes blazed with a fierce determination as he thought to himself, "Stop with the useless thoughts and focus. Wait, at least take one of them with me to the afterlife." With a battle cry, he shouted, Come on, I'll take you alone." His voice echoed through the air, a challenge to the Six Kings. Despite his battered body, his spirit remained unbroken, and his determination to take down at least one of his opponents with him seemed to grant him a surge of adrenaline. The general's roar was a testament to his unyielding resolve. General Yoon's thoughts drifted, and he thought of someone, his expression tinged with a mix of longing and regret. "If you were here at a time like this, it would have been a great help. Where are you? His voice trailed off, the unspoken name hanging in the air like a whispered prayer. For a moment, the general's gaze seemed to wander, his focus wavering as memories or emotions threatened to overwhelm him. But as a sword suddenly pierced through General Yoon's chest, the blade slicing through his armor and into his vital organs. He coughed violently, vomiting a pool of blood as his body arched in agony. The sword's wielder stood frozen, the blade still lodged in the general's chest, as if unsure of what to do next. General Yoon's eyes widened in shock and pain, but his gaze never wavered, his determination and fury burning brighter with every passing moment. Despite the mortal wound, the general's body seemed to defy the inevitability of death, as if driven by sheer willpower to keep fighting. Blood poured from his mouth, staining his lips and chin, and his breathing grew ragged, but his spirit remained unbroken. As the sword pierced his chest, General Yoon's eyes widened in shock and pain. Suddenly, a voice came from behind him, and the one who stabbed him uttered in surprise, "After what your body's been through, to show such might, even with your legs severed." Upon hearing the sound of the voice, General Yoon's throat constricted, and he thought to himself, "This voice? No way." His eyes seemed to glaze over, as if memories or emotions long buried were resurfacing. The general's reaction was a mix of shock, denial, and a hint of something deeper, a complexity that went beyond mere battlefield adversaries. The voice seemed to have unlocked a door in his mind, and the implications of what this could mean hung in the air, suspended like the moment before a storm breaks. The figure behind General Yoon spoke in a voice that sent shivers down the general's spine, saying, "As expected, brother, you're someone who cannot be left alive." The words dripped with a mixture of familiarity and malice, implying a complex history between the two. General Yoon's eyes seemed to cloud over, his mind racing with the implications of the voice and the words. The figure's tone was laced with a sense of inevitability. As General Yoon turned to face the speaker, his eyes widened in utter shock and disbelief. "You Rim, even you?" The words barely escaped his lips before his body gave out, and he suddenly fell down, the sword still lodged in his chest. The impact of the fall sent shock waves through his battered frame, and his vision began to blur. General Yoon's body hit the ground with a thud, his eyes fixed on Rim's face, a mix of shock, pain, and betrayal frozen in his gaze. The sound of his fall echoed through the air, a stark contrast to the silence that had preceded it, and Rim's expression remained unreadable as he stood over the general's lifeless body. Rim's voice was laced with a sense of reverence and finality as he spoke. "The ruler of this world is none other than Emperor Rim. But there was a god about the emperor, the god of war, Manhwa. With today, the history of the god of war ends." His words hung in the air, a declaration that marked the end of an era. The weight of his statement seemed to settle upon the surroundings, as if the very fabric of reality was acknowledging the passing of a legend. Yu Rim's gaze lingered on General Yoon's lifeless body, a mixture of emotions dancing in his eyes, before he turned away, leaving the legacy of the god of war to fade into memory. With a subtle smile, Yu Rim stood tall, his eyes gleaming with a sense of triumph and destiny fulfilled. "Now, I have finally become the true emperor," he declared, his voice filled with conviction and a hint of relief. The weight of his words seemed to resonate through the air, as if the very heavens themselves acknowledged his ascension to the throne. Seeing Wei-Yun, in great pain, you coughed up blood, your body trembling with the effort. The sound of your cough echoed through the air, a stark reminder of the mortal wounds you had suffered. Despite the agony, your eyes still burned with fierce determination, a testament to the unyielding spirit that had defined your legendary career as the god of war. As you coughed, your vision began to blur and your body weakened, but your willpower remained unbroken, a flame that refused to be extinguished. Yu Rim's voice was laced with a mix of sadness and resolve as he said, "You seem to be in pain. Let me make it easier for you." His words were tinged with a sense of finality, and his eyes betrayed a hint of sorrow, as if he was reluctant to take the life of the legendary god of war, my brother, who was also the god of war Bukshin, greatest general Sienwa, Yun my brother's corpse the enemy. Sienwa Yun's eyes blazed with anger and a deep sense of betrayal as he thought to himself, "How unfair! Not only betrayed by a comrade who I entrusted my back to. Yu Rim, you are with them? Even at this moment, I can't believe it." The weight of Yu Rim's treachery crushed him, and the pain of his wounds seemed to pale in comparison to the anguish in his heart. He couldn't fathom how his own brother could turn against him, and the sense of shock and hurt lingered, refusing to dissipate. The injustice of it all burned. Sian Wei-Yun's eyes welled up with tears as he gazed up at Yu Rim, his mind reeling with the weight of his brother's betrayal. "How could you, brother?" he seemed to whisper silently, his heart heavy with sorrow and shock. The pain of his physical wounds was eclipsed by the anguish of his brother's treachery, and for a moment, all he could think about was a deep bond they had once shared. Tears streamed down his face, a testament to the depth of his emotions, as he struggled to come to terms with the fact that as Sian Wei-Yun opened his eyes, he found himself surrounded by an unfamiliar darkness, the air thick with heat. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, and slowly, his surrounding began to take shape. The darkness seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and the heat was oppressive, making it hard to breathe. Sian Wei-Yun's mind was foggy, and he struggled to recall how he had gotten there. The last thing he remembered was everything going blank. Now he was in this strange, dark place. "What is this place?" he thought to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. The silence was oppressive, and he strained his ears, listening for any sound that might give him a clue about where he was and what lay ahead. Eon Wei-Yun's thoughts turned to the possibility of purgatory, a realm where souls might linger after death, atoning for their sins or waiting for judgment. He pondered the idea, his mind racing with questions. Had he not been killed by his own brother? Was this some kind of limbo, a place where he would have to confront the consequences of his own actions? As Sienwa Yun gazed down at the water covering his hand, he suddenly saw his reflection staring back at him. But it wasn't the reflection that shocked him, it was the state of his own face. His eyes widened in horror as he took in sight of his own visage, and he felt his mind reel with shock and disbelief. The reflection showed a face that was not his own. The features were different, the eyes, the nose, the jawline. Everything was unfamiliar. Sian Wei-Yun's shock turned to confusion, and then to utter bewilderment. Who was this person staring back at him? And what had happened to his own face? The question swirled in his mind as he stared at the reflection, unable to look away. Sian Wei-Yun's mind reeled as he stared at the reflection, his thoughts racing with confusion and disbelief. What is this? No way is this child me? The face staring back at him was that of a young boy, innocent and unaware of the world. It was a face that bore no resemblance to the strong, battle-hardened warrior he knew himself to be. The shock and bewilderment were palpable as he struggled to comprehend the truth. Was this some kind of illusion, a trick of the mind, or was he truly seeing himself in a different form? The question swirled in his head, refusing to settle, as he continued to stare at the reflection in horror and confusion. Sian Wei-Yun's senses snapped into high alert as he heard the sound of someone talking outside. His head jerked up, and he listened intently, trying to pinpoint the location and tone of the voice. Someone is outside, he thought to himself, his mind racing with possibilities. Who could it be? A friend, a foe, or perhaps someone who could help him understand the strange and unfamiliar world he found himself in. He held his breath, straining to hear more, his ears tuned to the faint sounds coming from beyond the darkness. Suddenly, the voice grew louder, and he caught snippets of conversation, but it was what was being said that made his heart skip a beat. He person's words sent a chill down Yun's spine as he pieced together the fragment of conversation. Brew chest, doing as we've been told. The word seemed to imply something sinister, and the fact that he'd seen a child's reflection in the water earlier added to his growing unease. The revelation hit Yun like a ton of bricks. The lord of the palace, his own child, uses medicine? The thought was abhorrent, and he couldn't help but wonder what kind of desperation or depravity would drive someone to such an act. The more he thought about it, the more his anger and disgust grew. How could someone so callous and heartless justify such actions? The Lord's reputation, his power, his influence, all seemed to pale in comparison to the atrocity of using his own child in such a manner. Yun's mind was filled with a mix of emotions, outrage, horror, and a deep sense of sadness. Yun's desperate attempt to climb up ended in frustration, as his hand slipped, and he fell back down with a thud. The sound echoed through the dark, damp space, and he let out a frustrated grunt. His palms were scraped and bruised, but he didn't let the pain deter him. He gritted his teeth and assessed the situation, trying to come up with a new plan. The darkness seemed to close in around him, but he refused to give up. With a determined glint in his eye, he began to feel his way around the space, searching for any possible means of escape. His fingers probed every nook and cranny, seeking a weakness in the walls or a possible handhold. Yun's mind was racing with the horrific realization that he was trapped inside the Chonghua, a device used for boiling people alive. The thought of being in a child's body, unable to escape, was terrifying. He looked up at the hole in the ceiling, but it seemed out of reach. The structure of the Chonghua was imposing, and the heat was unbearable. Panic set in as he thought about his situation. It's me, right? I am inside the Chonghua, he thought, trying to process the reality of the predicament. He knew he had to find a way out, but the circumstances seemed insurmountable. The person's words were cut short as the flame beneath the Chonghua roared to life, intensifying the heat to an unbearable level. Yun felt the scorching warmth closing around him, and his panic turned to desperation. The sound of the flames crackling and the creaking of the metal seemed to grow louder, and he knew he was running out of time. The heat was becoming almost unbearable, and he could feel it seeping into his skin. He gritted his teeth, determined to find a way out, but the circumstances seemed increasingly dire. The person's voice outside seemed to fade into the background as the sound of flames and his own ragged breathing became the only things that mattered. As the heat intensified, Yun's thoughts grew disjointed and fragmented. I can't even breathe anymore at this rate. Before I burn death, my mind. The words trailed off as his consciousness began to slip away, consumed by the overwhelming sensation of heat and pain. His vision blurred, and his eyelids grew heavy, as if weighed down by the crushing reality of his situation. The sound of the flames and the creaking of the metal seemed to recede into the distance, replaced by a dull roar that echoed through his mind. His thoughts dissolved into darkness, and his body seemed to relax, surrendering to the inevitable. As the voice called out, Yun's eyes snapped open, and he saw a figure standing before him. His gaze locked onto the person's face, and a mixture of relief and surprise washed over him. "Teacher!" he exclaimed, his voice hoarse from the heat. The figure's presence seemed like a lifeline in his desperate situation, and he felt a surge of hope. Was this person here to rescue him, or was it just a cruel trick of his own desperate mind? Yun's eyes remained fixed on the figure, his heart pounding with anticipation. The teacher's enigmatic words hung in the air. The Avatar's descent is the dream of the Avatar. The flame is where the Avatar is born, and this place made for playing is the Avatar stage. Yun's mind struggled to grasp the meaning behind the teacher's cryptic phrases. He looked around at the Chonghua, the flames, and the confines of his prison. "How did you get here?" he asked again, hoping for a more concrete answer. But the teacher's response seemed to hint at something deeper, something beyond the physical realm. The teacher's gaze was intense, as if willing Xian Weiyun to understand the hidden truths he was revealing. The teacher's sudden shout cut through the air. "What are you doing?" "Dance." Xian Weiyun was taken aback, unsure how to respond. But as the teacher's words echoed in his mind, he felt an inexplicable urge to move. He raised his hands, and his body began to sway to an unheard rhythm. The flames around him seemed to pulse in time with his movements, as if the fire itself was dancing with him. Xian Weiyun's initial hesitation gave way to a strange sense of freedom, and he let his body move, surrendering to the moment. The teacher's shout had unleashed something within him, and he danced, lost in the intensity of the flames and the mystery of the moment. Avatar Descent Dance. The guards standing outside exchanged worried glances as the blue flame intensified, its growing power evident in the increasing heat and light emanating from the Changhua. "What a terrible thing to do." "Seriously," one of them muttered, their voice laced with a mix of concern and dismay. They seemed unsure how to react, caught between their duty to observe and report, and the inexplicable nature of the events unfolding before them. The guards' words were barely audible over the crackling of the flames, but their tone conveyed a sense of foreboding, as if they sensed that the situation was spiraling out of control. The old man stood behind the door. His eyes fixed on the blue flames danced higher and higher. A deep crease etched his forehead, and his brow was furrowed with concern. His gaze was intense, as if he was searching for something in the flames, or perhaps worried about the consequences of what was happening. His hands were clasped together, and he seemed to be holding his breath, his entire being focused on the spectacle before him. The old man's expression was a mix of worry and fascination. The old man's eyes widened in alarm as the flame's sudden shift to green filled the room. He hurried in, his face etched with worry. "Changhua!" he exclaimed, his voice laced with concern. His gaze swept the space, taking in Xian Weiyun's position amidst the flames. The old man's hands moved swiftly, as if he was trying to mitigate the situation or perhaps understand the implications of the green flame. His thoughts seemed to be racing, trying to decipher the meaning behind the color change and its potential consequences. The green flame seemed to hold significance, and the old man's reaction suggested that this development was both unexpected and potentially critical. The guards whispered among themselves, "Look over there! Ha! It's the court physician. He's been taking care of the young master as his personal doctor for 15 years. I'm sure he treats him like his own child." One of them nodded in agreement. "TSK bags. Exactly what I think, too." Their voices were filled with a mix of respect and familiarity as they spoke about the court physician's dedication and care for the young master. The guard's conversation was hushed, but their words conveyed a sense of admiration for the physician's commitment and the special bond he shared with his patient. The green flame engulfed the Changhua, and the old man's face contorted in distress. "To even use Changhua like this, that's just cruel," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. His eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at the scene before him. The old man's expression was one of shock and horror, as if he couldn't comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. He took a step back, his movements hesitant and uncertain, as if he was recoiling from the very sight itself. His face was pale, and his eyes seemed to hold a deep sadness, as if he was witnessing something that was beyond redemption. The guard's sudden exclamation, "Whoa, what is this?" caught the old man's attention, and he turned back, his face still etched with shock and dismay. As he turned, his eyes widened even further, and his mouth dropped open in utter astonishment. Whatever he saw, it seemed to have left him speechless, his entire being frozen in a state of complete shock. The old man's reaction was intense, as if he had witnessed something that defied all logic and reason, something that had shattered his understanding of the world. The guard's words trailed off, and an eerie silence fell, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The green flame coalesced into the majestic form of an ancient beast, its features becoming clearer with each passing moment. As the shape solidified, it was unmistakable, a mighty dragon, its scales glinting in the light of the flames. The dragon's roar thundered through the room, a deafening sound that shook the very foundations of the space. The air vibrated with the dragon's power, and the old man's eyes went wide with awe and trepidation stood frozen, his gaze locked onto the dragon, as if mesmerized by its sheer majesty. The guards stumbled backward, their faces pale with fear, as the dragon's roar echoed through the room, a primal and awe-inspiring sound. The scene shifted, and the camera plunged into the heart of the Changhua, where Siwayun's dance had become a mesmerizing spectacle. His body moved in perfect harmony with the flames, his aura bursting forth from his very being. The energy emanating from him was palpable, a vibrant, pulsating force that seemed to merge with the fire itself. As he danced, his aura swirled around him, taking on a life of its own. The flames danced in tandem with him, their movements a blur of color and light. The dragon's roar still echoed in the background, but within the Changhua, the only sound was the soft whoosh of the flames and the rhythmic beat of Siwayun's dance. His aura continued to build, a brilliant, shimmering light that threatened to overflow the boundaries of the Changhua. Siwayun's eyes met his teacher's, and he saw the nod of approval, the smile of satisfaction. "Yes, that's it," his teacher said, his voice filled with pride and encouragement. Siwayun smiled back, a radiant grin spreading across his face. In that moment, he felt a deep connection with his teacher, a sense of understanding and shared knowledge. The teacher's words were more than just praise. They were a validation of Siwayun's growth, his mastery of the dance, and his connection to the Changhua. The smile that passed between them was a moment of pure understanding, a silent communication that spoke volumes about their bond and their shared passion. Siwayun's teacher stepped forward, a smile still on his face, and said, "Let me join too." Without another word, they both began to dance, their movements perfectly synchronized as they flowed across the space within the Changhua. Their eyes locked onto each other, a deep connection sparking between them. As they danced, their movements became a beautiful, intricate ballet, each step and gesture mirroring the other. The flames seemed to respond to their dance, swirling and leaping in time with their footsteps. The air was filled with intense energy, as if the very fabric of reality was being woven and unwoven by their dance. Together, they seemed to be creating something new, something powerful, their bond growing stronger with every passing moment. The energy emanating from Siwayun and his teacher's dance began to surge outward, bursting beyond the boundaries of the Changhua. The flames transformed into a strong, pulsating blue energy that flowed outward in all directions. The blue energy was intense and powerful, illuminating the surrounding space with a brilliant electric blue light. As it flowed outward, it seemed to be imbuing everything it touched with a sense of vitality and strength. The old man, the guards, and anyone else in the vicinity were bathed in the blue glow, their faces filled with a mix of awe and wonder. The energy's power was palpable, and it seemed to be calling out to something or someone, drawing them inexorably toward the Changhua. The guards exchanged disbelieving glances, one of them whispering, "I've never seen anything like this before." The other guard nodded in agreement. "You worked here for 15 years and never seen something like this. Who would believe it if someone told them?" They spoke in hushed tones, their eyes fixed on the spectacle unfolding before them. The guards' faces reflected their astonishment, their minds struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what they were witnessing. They seemed to be questioning their own sanity, wondering if they were dreaming or if this was indeed reality. The guards' conversation trailed off as they continued to watch, mesmerized by the blue energy and the dance within the Changhua. The green dragon's roar thundered through the air once more, and the guards' eyes widened in alarm. "This doesn't look like a dragon in rampaging," one of them exclaimed, their voice laced with concern. The guards took a step back, their faces pale as they gazed at the dragon's majestic, yet fearsome form. The dragon's roar seemed to be growing louder, its power and intensity increasing with each passing moment. The old man's eyes were wide with shock and disbelief, his face frozen in a mixture of awe and horror. He stood motionless, his body rigid as he watched the unfolding spectacle. His gaze darted between the green dragon, the blue energy, and Siwayun's dance, his mind struggling to comprehend the sheer magnitude of what he was witnessing. The old man's expression was one of utter bewilderment, as if he had stumbled into a realm beyond his understanding. He seemed to be questioning everything he thought he knew, his entire worldview shaken by the events transpiring before him. The old man's shock and disbelief were palpable, his very presence seeming to vibrate with the intensity of the moment. The guard voices rose in alarm as tracks began to appear, and they cried out, "The solar celestial path! Get back!" But it was too late. The path exploded in a blinding flash of light and energy, sending shards of celestial power flying everywhere. The guards and the old man instinctively covered their faces with their hands, shielding themselves from the debris. When they cautiously opened their eyes and looked at the solar celestial path, they were met with a sight of utter devastation. The path was completely broken, its fragments scattered everywhere. The destruction of the path seemed to have far-reaching implications, and the onlookers stood in stunned silence, unsure what this meant for the future. The old man's eyes widened in utter astonishment as a figure emerged in the distance, walking towards him. And then he saw his own reflection staring back at him. But it wasn't just a reflection. It was Yun, his face identical to the old man's own. The old man's shock was absolute, his mind reeling as he stared at the duplicate of himself walking towards him. The guards, too, were stunned, unsure what to make of this bizarre development. Yun's calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the old man's shock, as he continued walking toward the old man with an air of quiet confidence. The old man's eyes were fixed on Yun's face, his expression a mix of confusion, shock, and a hint of fear. The old man's face lit up with joy as he shouted, "Young master!" But Yun's response was far from warm. His voice was low and menacing as he declared, "From the depth of hell, I have returned." The words sent a chill down the old man's spine, and the guards exchanged nervous glances. Yun's eyes seemed to burn with an inner fire as he spoke, his voice dripping with an otherworldly intensity. The old man's joyful expression faltered, replaced by a look of concern and trepidation. The air seemed to vibrate with tension as Yun's words hung in the air, leaving everyone wondering what exactly had returned from the depths of hell. The roar that followed sent shivers down their spines, a primal sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the space. Yun's eyes lost their fierce intensity, and his body began to sway unsteadily. He stumbled, his energy seemingly drained, and felt the ground with a soft thud. The old man's expression transformed from concern to alarm as he rushed toward Yun, calling out, "Young master," in a voice filled with worry. The old man's movements were swift and urgent as he reached Yun's side. The scene shifted to a serene and well-appointed Imperial Court Medical Center, with intricately designed furnishings and soothing colors. Yun lay on a comfortable bed, his chest rising and falling with each gentle breath. The old man sat beside him, watching over him with a mixture of concern and devotion. The old man's eyes never left Yun's face, his gaze filled with a deep affection and worry. The old man's thoughts swirled with amazement as he gazed at Yun. "Incredible," he muttered to himself. He only lost consciousness due to dehydration and exhaustion, and these are just minor injuries. He shook his head, incredulous. It's hard to believe he survived being inside the burning solar celestial path, let alone the Changhua. Unbelievable. The old man's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with the implications. He couldn't fathom how Yun had endured such intense conditions and emerged with so few injuries. The old man's thoughts were a jumble of wonder, concern, and awe as he continued to watch over Yun, try and make sense of the extraordinary events that had unfolded. The door to the medical center room slid open, and 2 guards entered, their faces serious. "Court physician," one of them said, "the palace lord is urgently looking for you." The old man's expression turned grave, and he nodded. "I understand. I am coming." With a final glance at Yun, the old man rose from his seat and followed the guards out of the room, leaving Yun alone in the quiet space. The door closed behind them, enveloping the room in silence once more. Yun lay still, his chest continuing to rise and fall with each gentle breath. The person in black clothes stood on the roof, gazing down at Changhua with an intense stare. With a silent leap, they jumped down into the room, their eyes fixed on Changhua with a killing intent. The air seemed to grow colder as a mysterious figure approached Changhua's bedside. They carefully took out a small bottle from their cloak and poured some liquid into Changhua's mouth. The figure's movements were swift and precise, their eyes darting left and right to ensure they weren't being watched. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft dripping of the liquid into Chonghwa's mouth. The figure's gaze lingered on Chonghwa for a moment, but Chonghwa's eyes rolled back in his head, the whites visible as he let out a low, pained growl. The liquid seemed to burn his throat, and he started to spit it out, his body convulsing in discomfort. His muscles tensed, and he began to tremble violently, his bed creaking beneath him. The room was silent except for Chonghwa's labored breathing and the sound of his body shaking. The liquid's effect seemed to be coursing through his veins, causing him immense pain and distress. Chonghwa's face contorted in agony. His eyes still rolled back as he struggled to cope with the mysterious substance's potency. The figure in black clothes reappeared beside Chonghwa, their voice low and menacing as they whispered, "Blame your filthy mother for this." The words seemed to be laced with venom, and Chonghwa's eyes, still wild with pain, locked onto the figure. For a moment, their gazes met, and the air was charged with tension. The figure's words hung in the air, heavy with malice, as Chonghwa's body continued to tremble and convulse. The figure's face was shrouded in shadow, making it impossible to discern their features, but their voice was filled with an unmistakable hatred. With a final thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next chapter.